There's a frustrating pattern that shows up for a lot of people in their 40s and 50s. You try something to improve your financial situation. You put in effort. You give it time. And then, it fades. Maybe the income isn't consistent. Maybe the motivation drops. Maybe the results never quite connect into something stable. And after a while, it starts to feel like you're always starting over. Let's slow this down. Because that feeling isn't just about effort. It's about structure. More specifically, it's about whether your effort is building on itself or resetting each time. So let me ask you something honestly. When you put time into something, does it continue working for you later? Or does it stop the moment you stop? That's a very important distinction. Because if your effort stops producing the moment you step away, you're not building an asset. You're creating temporary output. And temporary output doesn't compound. Now here's where this becomes relevant. If you feel behind financially, you don't just need more income. You need your effort to accumulate, to build, over time, into something that becomes easier to maintain. And this is where the idea of a flywheel becomes useful. Not a burst of energy. Not a single result. But a system, where each action supports the next, and momentum builds gradually. So in this video, we're going to walk through what I call the AI Asset Flywheel. A structured way to think about building small systems that compound over time. Traditional advice around increasing income often focuses on linear effort. You work more, you earn more. You stop working, the income stops. And while that model works in the short term, it has a fundamental limitation. It doesn't accumulate. Think about it this way. If every dollar you earn requires fresh effort, then your progress is always tied to your available time and energy. And for most people over 40, time and energy are already spoken for. You're balancing work, family, and other responsibilities. You can't simply add more hours. Now here's where many people try to adjust. They look for efficiency, better tools, faster techniques, and that can help, to a point. But efficiency still operates within the same linear model. More output per hour is still output that stops when you stop. What you actually need is a system where effort builds on previous effort. Where what you create today continues to contribute tomorrow. And where, over time, the system becomes easier to run, not harder. This is what separates temporary income from compounding income. And this is where AI fits into the picture. Not as something that does the work for you, but as something that reduces the friction involved in building the system. AI helps you create faster, organize more clearly, and distribute more consistently. Which means you can spend less time on mechanics, and more time on structure. And when structure is in place, compounding becomes possible. So let's introduce the framework. The AI Asset Flywheel is a loop, not a straight line. And it has 4 core components: creation, distribution, conversion, and reinforcement. Let's slow that down. Creation is where you produce something valuable, an idea, a piece of content, a structured resource, something that solves a real problem for a specific person. Distribution is how that value reaches people, where it's shared, seen, and found consistently over time. Conversion is where that value turns into income, a guide, a product, a service, a clear exchange, value for payment. Reinforcement is what happens after: feedback, improvement, refinement, using what you learn to make the next cycle stronger. Here's why this works. Each component supports the next. Your creation feeds your distribution. Your distribution feeds your conversion. Your conversion gives you feedback. And that feedback improves your next creation. So instead of starting from zero each time, you're building momentum. And here's the part most people miss. You're not just creating content. You're creating assets that connect. Each piece has a role in the system. Each cycle makes the next one more efficient. And over time, the flywheel gains momentum. Not because you're doing more, but because what you've already done continues to contribute. Let's go deeper into each component. because understanding how they work together is what makes this practical. Creation has to be focused, not random content, not whatever feels interesting that week. Something that solves one specific problem, consistently, for one specific type of person. This is where your existing experience becomes valuable. Think about what you understand clearly, that others still find confusing. What could you explain in a way that saves someone time or reduces frustration? That's your content foundation. And this is where AI becomes genuinely useful. Not to replace your thinking, but to help you organize it, structure it, and express it more clearly. You bring the insight. AI helps you shape it. Distribution is about consistency, not volume. You don't need to be on every platform. You need to show up repeatedly in one place. Because repetition builds familiarity. And familiarity builds trust. And trust is what eventually converts to income. This is why channels, newsletters, and consistent content platforms work. Not because of any single piece, but because of the accumulated presence over time. Conversion is simpler than most people think. You don't need a complex funnel or an aggressive sales strategy. You need a clear offer that connects directly to the problem you're already solving. Someone discovers your content. It helps them with something real. And you offer a deeper version of that help at a modest price, a guide, a template, a structured system. Let's pause here, because this is where many people overthink things. They assume they need everything figured out before they can offer anything. But conversion is just the natural next step in an already helpful relationship. If your content is genuinely useful, offering something more structured is not a sales tactic. It's a logical extension. Reinforcement is what separates a flywheel from a treadmill. After each cycle, you pay attention. What resonated? What got engagement? What questions came up repeatedly? You use that information to improve your next creation. And here's the important part. You're not guessing anymore. You're learning from your own system. And over time, your output becomes more targeted, more useful, and more effective. Each cycle of the flywheel produces better results than the last. Not because you're working harder, but because you're working with accumulated information. Let's make this concrete. Imagine someone named Eric. He's 49. Works in logistics. Over the years, he's developed a strong practical understanding of how to reduce delays and improve efficiency in small supply chains. Nothing flashy, just hard-earned, specific knowledge. Now he applies the flywheel. He starts with creation. Simple, clear explanations of common logistics problems and how to solve them. He uses AI to help organize his ideas and refine how he communicates them. Nothing complex. Just practical guidance, consistently structured. Then he focuses on distribution. He picks one platform and shows up consistently. Over a few months, a small audience forms. Business owners and operations managers who recognize the problems he's describing. People who appreciate that he explains things clearly, without jargon or hype. Now he introduces conversion. A structured guide on improving logistics efficiency for small businesses. Priced at $30. Let's slow this down. If Eric sells 25 copies per month, that's $750. Not life-changing on its own. But here's what matters. That guide is an asset. It exists. It's findable. It sells while he's working his regular job. And now the reinforcement begins. Eric pays attention to what his audience responds to. Which topics generate the most questions? Which explanations get shared? What do people ask about after reading the guide? He uses that feedback to improve his next piece of content. And eventually, to build a second product. Now the flywheel is spinning. Each cycle builds on the last. The audience grows gradually. The content improves. The products become more targeted. The income becomes more consistent. Not dramatic, but directional. And over time, What started as a modest $750 per month becomes a system that produces income with less and less fresh effort. Because the effort already invested continues to compound. Now let's be direct about what this actually requires. Because flywheels don't start fast. They start slow. In the early stages, it can feel like nothing is happening. You're creating, you're distributing, but the results are minimal. That's not a sign that the system isn't working. That's just what the beginning of compounding looks like. The nature of a flywheel is that it resists movement at first. It takes consistent input before it builds enough momentum to carry itself. So instead of measuring success by early results, measure it by whether the system is moving. Are you creating consistently? Are you distributing in one focused place? Is your conversion offer clear? Are you paying attention and improving? If those answers are yes, the flywheel is turning, even if the results feel slow. And this is where patience becomes strategic, not just philosophical. You're not waiting for luck. You're allowing momentum to build. And the people who stay with it are the ones who eventually look back and realize the system is carrying them, rather than the other way around. So when we talk about building income with AI, the real question isn't, what can I create? It's, what system can I build that continues to build on itself? Let's slow this down one final time. You don't need constant breakthroughs. You need consistent cycles. Creation, distribution, conversion, reinforcement. When those cycles repeat, they form a flywheel. One that grows stronger over time. One that reduces the need to start over. One that turns effort into something that accumulates. So instead of feeling like you're always beginning again, you begin to feel something different. Momentum. And that momentum doesn't come from doing more. It comes from building something structured and allowing it to compound. That's what changes the outcome. Not the effort you put in on any single day, but the system that keeps moving long after you step away from it.